Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast of Jackson and Kyle. I am joined here, as always, by the man who hopefully one day his teams can replicate the success of Tampa Bay sports. I said that last year as a joke. It's no longer a joke, Kyle. How are you holding up?
You know what? It's gonna come back. Boston will be back. It's okay. Tampa, they're on a hot streak right now. They have Tom Brady. Statistics show that Tom Brady creates winning cultures in cities. Wherever he's been, he wins. Even if he's not playing a professional sport, he wins. So we'll be fine. It'll bounce back. Once Brady takes over as like a coaching role for the Patriots, we're going to be back.
Is that what you tell yourself to make it feel better?
I don't know. I don't even think there's no way he wants to be a coach, so it's not happening. So It's okay though. We're still bouncing back. We got the Red Sox are the best team in baseball right now, or one of the best teams in baseball. So we're in the conversation.
Yeah, you got that. Let's talk about the Lightning for a bit. We'll start off with this, and then we'll get over to the meat of the episode. I do have my champagne for the championship. I was gonna pop it during the podcast, but last time I almost hit a light. So I was smart. I was responsible. Popped the champagne beforehand. Yes, but it is it's incredible, right? This team, we all thought that, I don't know, as a Tampa Bay sports fan, all I knew was pain. And then 3 championships in, get this, Kyle, in 283 days. The 28-3 memes will not stop for poor Atlanta Falcons fans. 3 championships by Tampa Bay. It's a lot of fun. And that's the main thing I have to say.
Yeah, and the thing is I was talking to your brother about this actually, and your brother's also an avid Lightning fan, and the thing I was telling him is like I don't know if I've seen in recent memory a team flip the script quite like this Lightning team. This was a team that we looked at literally 3 years ago, basically, and said this team's a choke artist. They can't get it done in the biggest moments. And it's like, oh, this is a really good regular season team, but they clearly can't win the big ones. And then all of a sudden they go, and it justifies, everything that happened in years past to get to this point. Because this is, without a doubt, the most impressive team in the last decade, probably in the NHL, just in terms of roster building and all this stuff. They've been a competitive team since, I think, like 2010. And they've continued to be this really competitive team. And then now these last 2 years, it finally works out for them, which is good to see because it's nice to see the best teams actually win championships. It does stink that our rivals win this championship. And they definitely took advantage of the situation of this North Division being the worst division in the history of hockey. But, they beat the teams in front of them and they beat them really badly. They're still the best team in the league and they won the championship because of it.
It was such a weird run where the Habs were the 4th best team we played, really. I thought Carolina was good, despite the fact that we beat them in 5. They were really good. Florida was very good. And the Islanders, obviously, were a great test. And then the Habs were kind of just like, they kind of ran out of gas a little bit. But yeah, it was cool. It's last year was the most satisfying I think a championship can get. Seeing guys who have been on your team for a decade, heartbreak after heartbreak loss, and win it with the same core. So to win a second one, I got to be honest, it's not as fun as the first one, but it still is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Winning championships is fun, no doubt about it, no matter when, or, it could be back-to-back. It could be the first time, in 16 years like the first one was. No matter what, championships are fun, and that was the big thing for Tampa Bay getting their second. And I just continue to say this team for right now, I still think they have the best player in hockey. The last 2 years, I know 2 years ago,
Maroon.
No, yeah. Kucherov's the best player in hockey in my book. I think, 3 years ago, he led the league in points. He's taken a dip in points the last 2 years. Obviously, this year he was injured, so that really affected it more than anything else. And, whenever the guy's on the ice, though, he just makes winning plays. That's basically what he is. And I get the brilliance of McDavid and, the way he can dominate games sometimes. But Kucherov just goes on the ice and makes winning plays no matter what. That's what's most impressive to me. Then you couple that with Hedman being the best defender in the league. He wasn't the best in the league this year, but year to year he's been dominant. And Vasilevsky just cementing himself as the best goalie of probably the last 5 or 6 years with this season. He's phenomenal. And having him at the back along with the rest of this roster, it's just insane that they're able to build this team.
Yeah, a couple years ago, it was a legitimate question of did the Lightning make the right move, moving off of Ben Bishop and sticking with Vasilevsky? It's not a question now. He's answered all of that. Also, with Kucherov, I would say he's the best offensive player in hockey. I would say he's once you get past the blue line, I would say that's the case. I think overall, I would probably still take guys like McDavid and McKinnon, but also Kucherov maybe the best post Stanley Cup celebrator currently in the NHL. Did you see his press conference?
Yeah, that was funny. Russian guys know how to celebrate. We talked about it with Alex Ovechkin, and now Kucherov's in the same boat.
Yeah. Funny enough, the On the Sideline podcast actually came up in this press conference. I'm not sure if you saw this, Kyle.
No, I did not. What happened?
Yes, here, I will play the clip. Hey, Nikita, how do you feel about everyone who watches the On the Sideline podcast and is Team Kyle instead of Team Jackson?
Number one bullshit.
Yes, incredible that came up. Wow, unbelievable.
That's hilarious. Although I'm a little disappointed. I've spent like 3 podcasts in a row saying he's the best player in the world, and he's just going to call it bullshit for Team Kyle. I don't appreciate that, Nikita.
Yeah, Nikita, again, was he trying to gas me up or was he trying to insult you? It's hard to tell with Kucherov. He doesn't make it very clear with a lot of his stuff.
No, not at all. It's unfortunate, but it's all right. I still believe in him, and there'll always be a space on the Boston Bruins for him if he ever decides to change course.
Yeah. Kucherov, what do you think about joining the Boston Bruins?
Number one bullshit.
Yeah, okay. I guess he's not a big fan of that idea. All right. Let's get into the NFL of it all. Kyle, why don't you set up how this podcast is going to work?
All right. So if you've missed a lot of our division previews so far, first of all, what are you doing? How dare you? And second, you should go back and listen to them. This is the last division of the AFC. This is the AFC East. What we're going to do is I'm going to rank all of these divisions once again for you. And then I'm going to go through each of the teams in the division and rank them from number 4 to number 1. Each team that I rank, we're going to go down the list and talk about what they do well, what they don't do well, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, which Jackson has broken down using his own algorithm that he's built. And we're going to talk about each of these position groups and the strengths of these teams going from 4 to 1. And then we're going to see how his rankings match up with my predictions. And then we'll give you a chance for comments, which, be nice in the comments once again. So, yeah, you ready to get into it?
Yes, let's jump into it. Maybe some high hopes with hoping that people are nice in the comments. But why don't you kick things off here?
Yeah, so once again, like I said, we're going to rank the divisions. I had the AFC East as the 5th best division in football. That's number 5 there. The 5th best division. So once again, recapping the AFC, I had the AFC North as the best division in football. I had the AFC West as the 3rd best division in football. I have the AFC East as the 5th best division in football. And I have the AFC South as the 7th best division in football. I did not set this up coincidentally to make it odds and evens for AFC and NFC. It just worked out that way. So AFC East is the 5th best division in football because once again, like a lot of the AFC, which I've said, the wild card spots I think are going to be really competitive and interesting. I think that there's 3 potential playoff teams in this group. I think the wild card spots are really up for grabs in the AFC. I see 3 teams. I do see a clear-cut division favorite, but I see 3 teams that can make the postseason out of this group. The one team I don't see making the postseason out of this group is the New York Jets. I really like the hiring of Robert Saleh for the New York Jets, but they are going to come in at number 4. This is a project team. I mean, there's going to be a lot of players on this list be like, hey, we really like this guy. We really like his future. We're really excited to watch him play. But, this was a team that we talked about being one of the worst in the football last season, and it's not really going to change this season. That's 2 to 3 years from now where I expect the Jets to be competitive again if all goes well. So Jets coming in as a clear-cut number 4 for me.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that lost their first 14 games of the season, right? Or maybe 13. They didn't win a lot last year. Well, second worst team in football. It makes sense that these things take time, and this is definitely a rebuilding year. And you mentioned Robert Saleh. He ended up at 24th in the coaching rankings. Again, if you're a rookie head coach, you're going to be far down in those rankings. That's just the way I evaluated that. So you also have Zach Wilson, who, interestingly enough, was 24th in my quarterback ranking, which is tier 4. So right off the bat, Wilson, and again, it's just for this year. Wilson is my favorite rookie quarterback. I've talked about this to death, but it's going to take some time. These things typically don't just, typically you don't hit the ground running. So it's a rebuilding year.
Yeah, I mean, I think even the most optimistic Jets fan has to say that this makes sense. That I think like 5 wins is like the goal this season. That's at least progress to this team, and you're probably seeing good things out of these players, namely Zach Wilson, who is the we'll see what happens. You were obviously ranked him as the number 1 quarterback. I did not have. I had him as the number 2 quarterback, which was a little more the like conventional thinking, but there are people who rated him very highly. His skill set, obviously, in college was very prevalent, and his ability, a lot of his qualities translate to the NFL today and what he can do. So we'll see what happens with Wilson going forward in year 1.
Yeah, what is the hope you get out of Zach Wilson? If you're a Jets fan, are you just hoping that he, plays competent? Are you hoping that he doesn't have a Sam Darnold season? What's the hope?
I think after watching Darnold the last few seasons, I think the biggest thing you're hoping for is just taking care of the football, right? I don't think they're going to put him in a lot of situations to have to do too much as a rookie. But I think the biggest hope is that you're just not turning the ball over and putting your defense in the worst situations. Because as we're going to get into this defense, it's not terrible. This isn't like a dire situation on defense. I think there are some places where they're bad, but I think there's some good players on defense. You just don't want to put them in a situation to lose immediately. So if he can just take care of the football and make the right throws, and then obviously if he has a few moments of magic like he did in college, then I'd say that's a really good season from Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We'll move on to the rest of the offense now. Halfback room isn't spectacular. They did draft Michael Carter in the 4th round, who some people are very high on. I think he's a good runner. I had my issues. I think, if I remember correctly, I had some other issues with him, but still, there are people who liked him a lot. You have Ty Johnson, who I thought flashed a little bit in Detroit. He's a 3rd-year player, maybe getting a little bit more playing time, could do something. And Tevin Coleman, who barely played in 2020, is good in the Kyle Shanahan scheme, though, which is what this Mike LaFleur scheme will be like, we would assume, because he was under Shanahan. So maybe there's some thoughts there. It's still not a great halfback room. This is a tier 5 halfback room for me, though.
Yeah, and I think the biggest success you could see out of this Jets halfback room is that if it looks like San Francisco, if you have 3 guys all getting carries, doing different things. Carter, from what I remember him at North Carolina, has great speed, great outside running ability. Tevin Coleman getting some tough yards, and same with Ty Johnson. So you have these things that can kind of change up, different guys you can put in different situations. If you get the best performances out of all of them, this turns into a solid running back room overall. But still, when you're looking at running back rooms, there's no really star. There's no clear-cut one guy here, which obviously docks it a little bit.
Yeah, and going on to wide receivers, this is one that, when it came to tier 5 wide receiving rooms, there were 4 that I felt good about putting him in tier 5, and there was one that there was an extra spot I had to fill. So I did end up putting the Jets into tier 5. At one point, I didn't have him there. I ended up putting him here. And they have good players. You have Corey Davis. You have Denzel Mims. Jamison Crowder was good last year. They drafted Elijah Moore, who a lot of people are high on. Again, I'm not as high on him, but, again, wide receiver, notoriously difficult position to evaluate, and I could easily be wrong about that. And then Keelan, and I didn't hate him either. And Keelan Cole, who's been a consistent 500 to 700 yard guy. So they have players. The tight end room, not as much with Chris Herndon, who has really struggled to stay healthy, although he can be a pretty good receiver when he is healthy. And then you have Tyler Kroft, who's sort of a solid blocker, and Ryan Griffin, who's kind of whatever at everything, going into his 9th season. So they have a lot of guys. I just don't know if they have the high-end talent. And again, there's a lot of good wide receivers and a lot of good wide receiving rooms out here. So it doesn't feel like a tier 5 wide receiving room, but that's just where it ended up.
Yeah. No, I think that evaluation is pretty spot on because like you said, there is depth here, but it just feels like all there is depth. There's not like a guy you're like, oh, I'm excited to see him. I guess you could say, I like Denzel Mims. I liked what I saw from him last year. I want to see him get in the end zone though. So, you like some of the players, but you haven't seen any star potential out of these guys. And that's why they're obviously docked lower.
Yeah. I mean, the best guy right now would be Corey Davis, who has had one season as a good number 2 guy, but he's never shown to me he can be a number 1. So that's a bit concerning.
And it was also in a contract year too. So
yep, that's a very good point as well. And that Titans offense, it makes things easier for wide receivers sometimes. to round off the offense, we have another tier 5 here with the offensive line. I like Mekhi Becton a good amount, and I like Elijah Vera-Tucker, their first-round pick. Didn't love the trade, but I still like the player. He should play guard. I think he'll be a good guard. But you have George Fant, Greg Van Roten, and Dan Freeney to round out that offensive line, it appears, and that's not a great situation. So a couple guys I like, but no one who I'm like, oh, he's a top 5 player at the position. And a couple situations, Van Rotten's not awful, but he's not amazing either. Fant and Feeney are maybe replacement level. So they got some holes here in the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that people are going to be watching though is the left side of this line, right? If that's if you see 2 building blocks out of that, you're happy. I don't think anyone's expecting a good offensive line out of this group, but if you're seeing Becton and Vera-Tucker look at their highest potential, then you're happy with it, because then you say, okay, we can build off of this, replace some of these guys on the right side of the line. But if Vera-Tucker and Becton are the big thing here, they've invested a lot in these two. They've invested a lot in these two to make this offensive line good more quickly, and I think that's going to be the big thing for them, is just watching these two grow.
Exactly. It all goes back to you want your young players to be good and get better. That's the hope. You're paying less attention to the win total. Only 1 win, and that's by Zach Wilson being a tier 4 quarterback. Other than that, everything was tier 5 for the offense. So not the best offense. In fact, the worst offense in this system, 32nd in the league.
Yeah, and it seems harsh because, like you said, there is depth at the skill position spots, but until we see one of the guys look like a real 1,000-yard receiver or a 1,000-yard rusher, it's just hard to put it in that category, right? It's just going to that's always just going to rank lower than you expect.
Yeah, I agree. And moving on to defense, the defense gets better, although there still is one glaring hole, and that's the coverage situation, where you have for corners, you have Blesson Austin, Bryce Hall. You got guys that are like Javian Goodry and Lamar Jackson, who are, both undrafted free agents and look that way. The safety room's better with Marcus May, Ashton Davis. Again, nothing special. Maybe we'll see some CJ Mosley, which could help the coverage. And then have Gerard Davis, who again I would say is replacement level. So this is not a good coverage unit. It's another tier 5 situation for the Jets. And again, these are things I value, is how well do you cover? I don't know how much I trust these corners to cover.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough situation. Is this going to be any different than last season, where it's, Marcus May trying to bail everybody out and just, doing his best to make this team look respectable? That's pretty much how it's going to look again this season, right?
Probably. Unless they know something we don't. Maybe they're expecting a Lamar Jackson year 2 jump. We've seen another Lamar Jackson have a great second year. I'm not sure if I trust that this one will do it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it'll be interesting, but yeah, I feel overall that this is easily the weakest group of the 4 in this one, because the other 3 are really good. But yeah, it's a tough situation for them. They emphasized adding other players to the offense side. They weren't able to address this side of the ball in the secondary.
Yeah. I also like this comment. Why are they spending so much time on the Jets? We're about 12 minutes into the Jets talk. People ready to move on already. We'll go to the rest of the defense now. You're right. This is where it gets better. We have a couple of tier 2s right here for the run defense and pass rush. You got CJ Mosley and Gerard Davis, and then the defensive line with Quinnen Williams, who was really good. He made my, I can't remember if I posted it yet. I don't think I have, but I made a top 10 interior defensive lineman. He made that list. I think he had a great second year. You have Sheldon Rankins, who I think is good as well, who will be next to him. Edge, you got Carl Lawson, another real underrated player with, Vinny Curry next to him. So it's solid. This is a couple of tier 2s here for me.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because I like the guys in the linebacker group. I like Mosley, I like Gerard Davis, and then this is a really good defensive line, I think, or not really good. This is a good defensive line, though. Like you said, Quinnen Williams obviously made a huge leap last season, which is good because for his sake, it looks so bad in year 1. You're like, oh, this could be a disaster, and he looked so good last season. And then obviously you talk about Lawson's obviously fantastic too, and they got really good value for him. So they emphasize this, the front 7 over the secondary. We'll see how it works out for them, but this is a solid group.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the way I like to build a defense. I'll say that much. I like building from the back to the front. And the one thing I will say though is, with this Robert Saleh head coach team, they did have success by kind of having a great front four. But I think what was underrated is, my memory serves me correctly, Pro Football Focus graded that year with them having it was at least a top 5 coverage unit. It might have been number 1. So their coverage was really underrated that year. They had guys like Richard Sherman who could really play. So this might be, again, this is kind of why I say this is a rebuilding year. You can have that stuff up front, but if you can't cover it, it's very rare that a team has success with a bad secondary.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes it harder on everybody else, right? If they can't get coverage, I mean, there's really not much to think about it. It makes sense. If guys are getting open more quickly, it's a lot harder for a front seven to be successful. It's as simple as that. And I think it is going to be a tough year for the Jets again, but I think the only thing you hope for is a little bit of improvement.
Yeah. Finally, for the kickers, this is a tier 5 as well. Sam Ficken is the one guy who, he's a career 72.9% field goal kicker, which is not very good, 35 for 48. They also have an undrafted free agent who, I got to be honest, Kyle, I don't feel comfortable pronouncing his name. I'll spell it for you. It's Chris Naggar, which is not, it's a very unfortunate last name. And I looked up the pronunciation, and it's just the N-word. That's just what I keep hearing. Maybe there's a slight difference. I am hard of hearing, so maybe there is a thing I can't pick up. But we'll call him Chris N-word. That'll be his name. I don't know how to say it.
Okay, yeah, we can move on from that one. We'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and just go right around that.
All right.
Moving on to number 3 here.
Well, here, let me real quick. Let me just finish off the Jets.
This up.
Final score for them, their 24th defense, 32nd offense, puts them at 31st overall, only ahead of the Texans at 2.06 wins. So I'm not high on the Jets this year and Zach Wilson has half of their win totals for me.
Yeah. And you know what? Like I said, it's one of those teams that you look at and you're just hoping for the individual numbers to be good. So yeah, we can go on from the Jets here. Going to number 3, this is where this division gets interesting. You may call it biased. I don't really care. I got the Dolphins at number 3, and it just comes down for me. I think that this team had holes on their defense, and they didn't really improve them. Or not defense, sorry, on their offense, and they didn't really improve them enough for me. I don't love a lot of the additions they made. They drafted a wide receiver that I like, but at the same time, I still feel like that there's issues with a lot of this group. And the questions still remain on Tua Tagovailoa. So I got the Dolphins here at number 3. I still think they're going to be a pretty competitive team. Brian Flores has proven that he can be competitive. We'll just see how it works out overall.
I have some real concerns about this Dolphins team. They're probably the team that I think this will be I would predict when I made all this list, over a month ago at this point, this was the one that stood out to me. That I'm like, okay, this is going to be one of my more hot takes because I'm much lower on the Dolphins than I think a lot of people are. Brian Flores, I'm a big fan of. I rated him as a 12th best head coach, and he's only going into his 3rd year. So I'm a big fan of Flores for sure. And when I just talk about defenses, X's and O's, they're one of the best in the league at that. Miami is. The biggest concern maybe is Tua right now, who I have Tua as a tier 5 quarterback. He was 28, so he was just barely a tier 5 quarterback. But, losing Fitzpatrick actually is a big deal. And I just don't know how confident I am in Tua taking that next step. He could. It's possible. But I don't know how you can watch the tape last year and not be concerned by Tua's lack of arm strength. It was a real concern at times. And he's going to have to improve. And he's probably going to have to improve not just to be a tier 4 quarterback, but a tier 3 quarterback for this team to really have a chance, I think.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's concerning. I was obviously high on Tua beforehand, so we'll see what happens. I think he can get better. I guess the question is, have they put him in a position to get better? They've obviously added some talent to the skill position so that they're trying to help, but I also feel like that the offensive line's still not very good to me, and I also don't know, like you said, the arm strength last season, which, he didn't have the best arm in college, but it was pretty amazing to watch how rough it looked at times last season. I thought he at least had a good enough arm, and it looked just soft. it looked like he was throwing softballs out there sometimes. So we'll see what happens with Tua. He obviously needs to improve a great deal before we can, take him seriously as a franchise piece. But outside of the Arizona game, there wasn't a lot to be optimistic about.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you could argue tier 4. Like I said, he was the best tier 5 quarterback I had. But if you look at the middle guys in tier 3 is like Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield. So like he's gonna have to, if this team wants to have a chance, he really does have to play at least at that level. He doesn't have to be a superstar, but I do think that I want to see some improvements, and I think there are things he can improve on. I think that like a good example is this became a big narrative. He doesn't throw to guys who are NFL open. He wants guys to get college open. Well, A, I think he can improve on that. And B, guys will probably be more college open now that he has a better receiving corps. So those are maybe some, if we're talking about the positives, those are potential positives and maybe ways you can hope that he could improve.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what the Dolphins have to hope upon. And, they have to hope this receiving corps gets a lot better than it was last season. It wasn't bad last year, but it also, I thought, wasn't a real strength for them.
Yeah. Speaking of weaknesses, we'll go to the halfback room. We don't have to spend too long on this to have, Myles Gaskin, who's solid, and he's not like a horrible back or anything. And to have Malcolm Brown, like it's not the worst. They're not like two horrible backs by any means, but they don't have guys who I feel good about being a starting halfback. So this is it's a tier 5 running back room.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really to say about this. They got some good games out of running backs last year by just plugging guys in that were like, oh, this guy's on the team now. So it was a really random year for them overall. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing really to get excited about this running back group at all.
Yeah, and it's not a big deal. If you don't have a top 5 running back, don't then have a tier 5 running back room. That's the strategy. Either try to be top 5, tier 1 or tier 5. Like, so I don't have an issue with that too much, but that is where I have them. For the receiving options, you have, this is a part where I put some real emphasis on. Obviously, to have Devontae Parker, who again, hopefully he can stay healthy. He did have his best year when there was that Fitz magic year, so he's still good. You also got Will Fuller. They drafted Jalen Waddle. There's still Lynn Bowden, who I thought, again, I'm never going to give up hope on Lynn Bowden. I'm just not. Preston Williams as well for a depth guy. And Mike Gesicki, who maybe isn't the best blocker, but he's great receiving. So it's a tier 2 wide receiving room for me.
I think the biggest thing is that they added more speed at this group, I think, overall. They added, obviously, Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle. We'll see how it works out for them. But, I mean, I think Will Fuller's out the first game. And, Preston Williams is still solid, too. And like you said, Gesicki is awesome. I just think that, the tough thing when you have Gesicki and Parker as your top 2 options, that was last season, there just wasn't enough speed for me on the field. Now they've added that. We'll see how this group develops overall. But it goes back to Tua, too. It's nice to have speed on the field, but you have to make sure you're getting them the ball. And we'll see if Tua is able to do that this next season. He obviously has a little bit of a rapport with Waddle, which obviously helps, but we'll see how it works at the NFL level.
Yeah. And to round out the offense, again, another rough spot right here with the offensive line. I have the running back room and their offensive line as the worst in football going into 2021. Looks like their tackles are going to be Austin Jackson. They're going to go with another year with that. Hope it works out. But again, rookie tackles do get better sometimes in their second year, as with every rookie position, although usually not like as much better as, say, a rookie corner or a rookie quarterback or something. So we'll see. Maybe they know something I don't. It looks like Liam Eichenberg will probably be the tackle. They talked about him maybe being a guard. I don't know why they would really do that, because I don't know who else they have to play tackle if it's not him. So that seems like a rough situation. Solomon Kindley, you have Robert Hunt, who that might be their bright spot, and he was a lower tier tackle last year. You move him to guard, maybe that'll be an improvement. Maybe that'll be a bright spot. Matt Sakura, who was Pro Football Focus rated him as the 3rd worst center in football last year. So, he's one of their bright spots as well. This is not a good offensive line.
Yeah, this was rough last season. It really hurt the offense, and it's probably going to hurt the offense again this season, right? Because there's just not a lot of things to look forward to with this group, and I don't think they improved it enough to really make a difference. So yeah, I think it's a really rough group overall, and I think it's really going to hurt this offensive group.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those, like, when I say I think that teams overvalue the offensive line, doesn't mean you do this. It doesn't mean that you go and do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. This is, this is, if it's not the 32nd worst offensive line in football, it's got to be at least bottom 2 or 3, right? There's just nothing to look forward to with this team. And you hope maybe that Jackson gets better, but there was really nothing that you could have saw from him last season that you like.
Yeah, no. Yeah, we always hope that Jackson gets better.
Yeah, do better, Jackson.
All right. Well, again, I believe it or not, I'm actually not a tackle for the Miami Dolphins. Yes. So 29th offense in football. So that's the concern. Defense, again, using my whole system, which is, I take it seriously, but it's not an exact science. We'll move on to the defense here. The bright spot of this team is their secondary. Their coverage unit is where things are incredible. You got Xavier Howard and even Byron Jones, who people are saying didn't have a great season. I thought it was fine last year. I don't know what. That's just my opinion. You also have Noah Igbenogany, who was not great. So maybe that third corner situation is a bit up for grabs. They have Eric Rowe and Javon Holland, who are, Javon Holland being the second round draft pick. Those are guys who, again, safety's maybe not the most important position given their scheme. They really value the corners, and when you have Howard and Jones, that's going to make things a lot better. And again, for linebackers, Jerome Baker, Benderick, McKinney, both guys who can play coverage solid. So it's a tier 1 coverage unit for me, really on the strength of Howard and Jones.
Yeah, I guess the one thing is that fifth guy is going to be the biggest question if they have to go into some nickel situations. I know you said that Noah, I can't pronounce his last name very well. Igbenogany is slated as the slot guy. I saw Jason McCourty too, which having watched Jason McCourty last season, I guess good luck. So that's the biggest question overall. How are they going to handle some slot guys in different situations like that? But I mean, Howard's got to be in your top 5 corners in the league right now. Jones is probably overqualified. I don't know if he's a top 10 corner in the league, but he's definitely overqualified as a number 2 guy. And that's what he is for this team. So that's very good, obviously.
Yeah. Again, this is how I like to build a team. It's funny because the Dolphins have built the team how I like to build the team, where they go from the coverage. They try to get the receiving core. The only real, I just feel like there's not enough talent at some of these other positions. You still do have to find talent there. Again, front 7, nothing spectacular. I've already mentioned the linebackers. You have Emmanuel Ogbah, who's racked up sacks last year. Is good. You have Jalen Phillips, who I'm a huge fan of. Again, he's a rookie. How effective will he be? But I'm a big fan of him. Christian Wilkins, I like. And then you have Raekwon Davis and Zach Seiler as the other guys on the inside. So they have players, but I just don't know how much talent they have. And I do feel like a lot of this depends on how well will Jalen Phillips really be able to change things. And for a guy who uses his strength, that usually takes a year. It just does. So for right now, it's a tier 5 pass rush and a tier 4 run defense. We can argue with that if you want, but there's only about 3 wins there total anyways. So and no one's saying to have a tier 1 in those groups. So that's where I have them.
Yeah, I mean, all that feels fair. Ogbah, obviously, we'll see. He obviously put up a lot of numbers last season. Phillips, like you said, I was also very high on him, but he's stepping into a situation where he kind of has to be the number 1 guy, right? And I think that's just a tough situation as a rookie. We talked about it during the surprises of each team. I like Andrew Van Ginkel as the 3rd guy. He's slotted back in that role, and I think he's a solid 3rd piece on that edge rushing group. And then, I mean, I think it's a solid group up for him, but like you said, the secondary is where this team's special. That's where they, it makes it a lot easier on this front 7 when you can cover like they can.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll say as well is, well, I'm not a huge fan of the talent. I'm a big fan of the way Brian Flores used this talent, and I thought that the talent was used very well. So yes, they maybe didn't have, in my opinion, the best pass rushers last year, but they still were able to consistently get pressure with the way things were schemed up. So you can scheme up the front 7 a lot easier than you can scheme up coverage, and that's why I'm a big fan of, put your emphasis on coverage. So I could see this team overperforming on their defensive side. I have their defense as the 10th rated defense, but again, the way they're built, maybe it goes a little bit higher. Also, Jason Sanders, tier 2 kicker. So that, with all that being said, it brings their total to 6.62 wins, 23rd in the NFL. I have to imagine that a lot of people are going to be taking the over on that bet.
Yeah, and you know what? It's interesting because the expectations now are really high with the Dolphins, and it almost feels like it's kind of set up for them to almost be disappointing during the season, right? Because they kind of shot above their weight last season. Nobody was expecting them to compete for a playoff spot. And now that they almost made the playoffs, everyone's expecting them then to make the leap to the playoffs this season. So, I mean, I think it's still possible that they're a good team, especially if Tua makes a leap. But at the same time, there's not a lot of things you're betting on with these bad position groups to get a lot better, except for Tua. The offensive line, I don't think, is getting better. The running backs aren't getting better. And you know what? I don't think the front seven is getting better this season with Jalen Phillips. I think that's going to take at least a year. So it really comes down to if Tua makes a leap, maybe they're in that conversation, but there's nothing really else to improve on.
Yeah, I'll field some, criticisms that I think are going to happen. Even, EM Baller in the chat says from 10 wins to 6. I'm wondering how that will work. Basically, the main reason why I do think it'll be lower is you are not your record. Not just because you win 10 games does not mean you are a 10-win team. And I do think that they were, one of the best examples of this is the turnovers. Every year, the team, it's very rare, almost impossible, a team will get back-to-back years of leading the league in turnovers. It just doesn't happen. And typically, you won't be top 5 back-to-back years because there's a lot of volatility. And a lot of times, turnovers are your opponent making mistakes. Now, you control it to some degree, of course, but, there is volatility. There is luck in there. And typically, that means that the defense might not be as good next year as it was last year, because of things like that. That's just one example. But, again, like that Raiders game, that was easily a coin flip game. You win. Again, you can go down the list and figure that out. But just because you are a team that won 10 games does not mean you are a 10-win talent team. And we've seen this time and time again, right? The Browns win, I believe it was 7 games or so, and maybe 8 games, and then they trade for Odell Beckham Jr., and they get even worse. You have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a few years ago. They won 9 games. They added Deshaun Jackson. They drafted O.J. Howard, and then they only won 5 the next year. So just because you won 10 games and you added talent does not mean you're going to win 11 the next year, and history backs that up.
Yeah. I mean, defenses regress a lot more than offenses year to year. Things change from year to year that make things different. And like you said, the turnovers were kind of an anomaly for this team. And I don't know if they can survive on that next season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But at the same time, while I still think they have the potential to be a good team, I'm betting on this team to be worse than last season rather than better.
I think that's also something that I think is fair and is what I would say. So again, I knew this was going to be a controversial take. And I think let's talk about, I guess for a second, how could we be wrong about this? To me, the easiest way is if Tua can, become that tier 3 quarterback, at least, then that's a big difference. Like that immediately, you jump up a spot.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big thing. I mean, quarterback, I think you've said it in your algorithm too. Quarterback adds the most wins of any position, right? As they move up the tiers, they add the most position, and that's not just your thing too. It's conventional wisdom that quarterback is the most important position in the sport. And so you can't have bad quarterback play and expect to get better. And the Dolphins were really good when Ryan Fitzpatrick was playing really well. They weren't very good when Tua Tagovailoa came in because he wasn't as good as what Fitzpatrick was for this team. So they could have an awesome defense next year, but if they're struggling on the offensive side of the ball with a bad running game and a bad offensive line, which, you know what, if you don't have a good running back, I know it doesn't add as much wins. If you don't have a good quarterback, though, having a running game and an offensive line helps make that quarterback look a little bit better, and they don't have good players at those positions, so that affects it.
Yep, I completely agree. And again, I could see them adding a win with their defense with how I've given them sort of a lower front seven. So again, that maybe now you're at like 7.5, and then if Tua can get another couple of wins, that's 9.5. That's a playoff team. But I think that's what they would have to do. I guess one last thing I'll say is, out of all the teams that, I ran this system for last year, and most teams were within a win or two of what the system would say, although the Dolphins were a team that overperformed a lot, which could mean that they got lucky last year. It could also mean that there's just something wrong with the system and the Dolphins are actually, there's something I'm missing. So that's the one factor I'll also throw in.
Yeah. So, this is a confusing team. I think it is this is probably, along with what we had the Steelers last season, or for the earlier show, the most controversial of the AFC. We'll see what happens. I still think that they have a chance at making the playoffs, but as far as those wild card teams are, I wouldn't be surprised if they fall off.
Yeah. Was our Steelers take? I don't remember what we said. What was controversial about that?
I guess that we had them third.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
I fine. I feel like that's a fine take. I'm just gonna. I guess I put the banner up. Is it the Patriots at number 2 here, or are you gonna go full homer?
No, I do have the Patriots at number 2,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like this is fair. They're not ready. I don't know if they're ready to compete with the Bills yet, but I think maybe besides the offensive line, I don't think it's crazy to say that I think the Patriots will be better at every position group than they were last season. Their offensive line was obviously really good last season, and I think it's going to be really good again this season. But, quarterback struggled last season, receiver struggled last season. I even think as far, for the talent that they have in the secondary, I thought the secondary struggled last season. All that being said, they struggled at all these different position groups, and they won 7 games. I think everything is going to be better this season. So that's why I expect this team to make the playoffs. I think that they have the talent to make the playoffs. Maybe the biggest question, obviously, is quarterback, but they're in that position to potentially make it. So I have the Patriots here at number 2 and probably in a playoff spot.
Yeah, I think this is fair. This is also, we are in lockstep here. I feel like this is, in my opinion, this is one of the easier divisions to rate. I think some people would have, Miami and New England's flipped, but to me, this feels right. Bill Belichick, best coach in football. That adds 0.8 of a win right there. Also, maybe this will get some of the Dolphins fans mad. I do have Mac Jones and Cam Newton as a tier 4 quarterback room. I think it's slightly better. I think, again, having an extra guy in there, I should have mentioned Jacoby Brissett is in the Dolphins quarterback room as well. But, I'm high on Mac Jones. I like him. And I think Cam Newton, again, if we're talking about last year, he did play better than Tua. So he was 2 spots ahead of Tua in my ratings. So, again, we're quibbling over that stuff. It's only a win difference, but I do have this as a tier 4 quarterback room. It's still probably the biggest concern going into the year, but there also was some upside as well with, hey, maybe Mac Jones takes over and is really good.
Yeah, and all the reports, although I don't believe reports in Patriots camp just because of the history, especially when it comes to quarterback. Shout out to Jared Stidham and Ryan Mallett being the answer.
I was so ready for Stidham to be good. I got a Stidham rookie card and everything. I thought it was going to be great.
Yeah, I never believe it, but I had Mac Jones as the 3rd best quarterback in the draft, which is the deep quarterback class. I like Mac Jones. I talked about it in this podcast. I bet on him last offseason to win the Heisman when he got robbed by Devontae Smith. So I've always been high on this guy. He's hyper accurate. I think he's just a leader. I think he knows what he's doing out there, and I'm excited to see him in the NFL. And I think he's going to take over the job sooner rather than later, honestly.
Yeah, and even Cam Newton, like, it is worth mentioning. Like, he threw for 400 yards against Seattle. Like, he wasn't a complete mess out there. Now, I think COVID certainly derailed his season. Like, COVID just affects people differently. I remember I was walking around. It was like not even like that. I think it was like I probably walked like 3 or 4 miles, like 6 months after I had COVID, and I was just like completely gassed where I'd never been before. And I do think COVID affects people differently. So maybe that's a factor as well. Maybe it's not. And maybe he just, again, I'm not sure how much it affects. He missed some throws as well, but he's not a horrible quarterback as well. And it's not, there's a higher floor at least as well compared to someone like the Jets, where if Zach Wilson has a bad rookie season, they're just going to be bad. In that regard.
Yeah, exactly. And, I was the same thing. I had chest congestion for months after COVID. So, and I don't run every day. So that obviously adds to it too. So we'll see what happens. I think at the very least, though, with Cam, they ran the ball pretty well. He's still really mobile. He can do stuff with that. You want to see him a little more accurate on some of the touch throws, but at the same time, I kind of just feel like, hey, that's who Cam Newton is at this point. He's not going to be great at a lot of that stuff. I think they're going to adjust his game plan. And part of the reason why I said I think at the very least I say everything's better for the Patriots than last season is, it can't get much worse than it was last season at times. So I think that Cam Newton, with the full season under his belt and with the full offseason, even if it's not great, I still think it's going to be better than last season. So I believe in this Patriots team, and I believe, they're going to figure it out at quarterback.
Yeah, going to running back, Thomas Merkel said running back is tier 3 for the Pats. Thomas, I'm not sure how you got access to my notes, but yes, that is correct. Tier 3 running back room. They, the Patriots just always seem to draft the running backs that I'm high on before the draft because, they got Damian Harris back then, who I was a big fan of. They now get Ramondre Stevenson, who I've talked very highly of. They did get Sony Michel as well, who obviously had that great rookie season and has kind of been since then. And they still have James White, who's a good receiving back. Could we see a breakout season from Damian Harris this year?
Yes, I think that's definitely a possibility. The biggest thing with him is staying healthy. First 2 years, he's battled with injuries, but when you take some of it with a grain of salt, but Pro Football Focus graded him really highly in the games that he did play last season. And I think the big thing with Harris and Stevenson too, who I wrote an article for GuyBostonSports.com about 4 Patriots who I think could have breakout seasons. And Ramondre Stevenson was one of the only rookie I put on the list. And one of the things I like about Stevenson and along with Harris is it just fits our kind of thing. We love one-cut running backs that are just downhill runners. Both of those guys kind of do the same thing. They see the hole, they cut and explode through it. I'm really excited to see those two. And then, James White is the mainstay in this running back room as the pass-catching blocking guy.
Yeah, I was ready for the Bucs to get James White. So close.
I kind of expected it to happen too because, it just made a ton of sense. But at the same time,
I thought it was going to happen.
I
was literally
kept him.
Yeah, I was literally when I was thinking about the Buccaneers, okay, so we have Leonard Fournette, we have James White. I'm like, okay, wait, no, we don't actually have him yet. It didn't go that way. Let's talk about the receiving room. They put a lot of emphasis in trying to make this better, and for a good reason. Wasn't great last year, and I do think they improved it. How much is the question? But they have Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers, and N'Keal Harry. And again, we take tight ends into account, so getting Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith does help push this into it's a tier 4 receiving back or receiving room. So it's still not fantastic, not elite, but it is a big upgrade from the tier 5 it was last year.
Yeah, this is the same thing that we've kind of talked about with the Jets too. Is like there's some pieces you like here, and there's pieces I like here. The problem is that there's no real elite guys to this group yet. We just haven't seen any of these guys really stand out. The weird thing is you look at this team and there was 2 nearly 1,000-yard receivers last year on this team now with Aguilar and Jacoby Myers, which is kind of funny to think about. But, Aguilar had a really good year last year, and I think he's going to add a specific role to this team, which I think they needed because they didn't really, Damiere Byrd was their vertical threat last season. And now Aguilar, I think, is much better than Damiere Byrd. How much better is the question. And then yeah, exactly. And then you got 2 awesome red zone options in Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. Smith's red zone numbers were fantastic last year with the Titans. Now, how much of that was the Titans offense? And then Hunter Henry's always just kind of been that guy when he's on the field. The question is he going to be healthy? Because that's been his thing too.
Yes. How concerned are you though that N'Keal Harry could be traded? That could really throw a wrench in all these plans.
I've been saying that we should trade him to the Rams for an in-and-out franchise at Patriot Place. I feel like that's a pretty good value for him.
Yeah, I take that.
That'd be great. Or we could trade into the Packers for a Culver's at Patriot Place. One of those two I'm down for. But, if we have to settle for like a 6th-round pick, I guess that's fine too.
Yeah. What draft pick would you let your team give up to get like an in-and-out next to you? If you're living in if you're living in a place where there is no in and out around you, I think I'd be happy about like giving up like a 3rd round pick, putting it out next right in my neighborhood. I'll take that.
Yeah, and if anyone gets on this chat to say in and out's trash, you're getting blocked. By the way,
yes,
don't you dare come in. Don't you dare come in here with that kind of negativity. Get the animal style fries; it'll change your opinion. Yeah, I think 4th or 5th round picks fair. In and out's fantastic.
Yes. Also fantastic. How's this for a segue? Probably the gold standard of the New England Patriots right now. Their best quality they have is their offensive line. You have Isaiah Wynn, who has struggled injuries, but has been good when healthy. They added Trent Brown as their other tackle, who, again, he had that weird season with the Raiders, but we've seen what he can do on the field. For guard, looks like it'll be Shaq Mason and Michael Onwenu. who, on 1U was a tackle last year and was great, and now they're moving him to guard, it seems. I believe that's the case. And you have David Andrews at center. This is a tier 1 offensive line.
Yeah, with Marcus Cannon out, he started out as on when you started as a tackle, was awesome there. He filled in at different spots based on injuries and was pretty much awesome anywhere. And he came into the league starting as a guard. That was his position heading into the draft. I mean, he's an awesome talent. The fact that we got him as a 6th-round pick is the steal of the draft last season. And this is a really good 5-man guys for offensive line. I really like Isaiah Wynn when he's on the field. The question is he going to be on the field? Trent Brown's a monster when he's, engaged. David Andrews is really good. Happy to have him back. Shaq Mason on Wenyu. The one thing I question about this team is the depth. I think that they have depth in the middle with Karras and Ferenc, but if one of Wynn or Brown get hurt, which is the 2 guys most likely to get hurt on this team, I question the depth at tackle. But overall, the first 5 guys I think are fantastic and among the best in the league.
Well, couldn't you just move on 1U to tackle then and then put, someone new in guard?
You could, and that's probably what would happen. But at the same time, it changes things around, and that's still a concern for me. And this line, it was awesome last season, but it got a little worse when Wynn wasn't playing. And that's just something you're concerned about with that left tackle spot with an injury-prone left tackle.
Yeah, man, I'm sure the Bill Belichick has already got some undrafted free agent who's going to be the next Joe Thomas.
That's probably the case, so it works out for us.
Yeah, exactly. So offense, not incredible, but not a mess either. 24th in the NFL.
And that feels fair. And the upside's higher, obviously, if Mac Jones can come in or Cam Newton gets better next season. And then as we talk about it, it could be a tier 3 running back room, but if you add Cam Newton into that and throw this running game together, I think they, led the league in carries last season and had him on the highest yards per carry last year, if I remember correctly. I didn't pull up the stats for this one, but, it's going to be a very good running offense again, I think, next season. If Jones comes in, that changes a lot of stuff too.
Yeah, and then going over to defense now, again, best part about this defense is going to be the coverage. And I think the question is, what Stephon Gilmore are we going to see? He had that defensive player of the year season, which, he's only done that once. I feel like I've only seen him be that player once. And so I would say he's probably not quite going to be the number 1 corner, but could he be a top 5 corner? I could see that. And then you have JC Jackson, who is really good. You also have Jonathan Jones and a bunch of safeties, Adrian Phillips, Devin McCourty, Jalen Mills, and Kyle Duggar, not to mention Donta Hightower could be back, Jawan Bentley, Raekwon McMillan, who's above replacement level, but he's off on coverage, so that doesn't apply here too much. But, there's a lot of good corners here. I do think this is still a tier 1 room, in my opinion, and I'm sure you can go into detail about some of these other guys.
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing with the Patriots and what they do with this group is, where does everyone align? Because obviously, I think Gilmore figures out this contract situation, shows up. J.C. Jackson has obviously proven to be very good. Probably a number 1 corner on a lot of teams, but here he's a number 2, and he's overqualified number 2, similar to the Dolphins. Oh my God, what a big play! Sorry, Jonathan Jones.
Happened? What are you watching? Let us know.
I'm watching the penalties for Euro 2020. Italy had a chance to win it in penalties, and Jorginho's penalty was saved. So we're going to go into sudden death penalties now here as Pickford makes the big stop.
Wow, big. Which one's the one that everyone hates? The internet's mad at one of those teams.
Historically, Italy is really annoying, but they're playing pretty exciting football this time around. And then England has just been really annoying because anytime they win a game, their entire fan base yells, "It's coming home." So
I see.
Yeah,
I think England's. I think Reddit's mad at England.
I wouldn't be surprised, and they're not a fun team to root for sometimes. Another save. Oh my God, this is nuts. So anyway, let's get back into the secondary. So where do these teams align? Where do these guys align? I think Gilmore and Jackson are sure things. I think McCourty is a sure thing at the back as that deep safety role. Now, the thing that's going to be interesting is you could see Adrian Phillips line up in the box, kind of in that Patrick Chung role. You can kind of see him line up in that big nickel role. But at the same time, Jalen Mills has been really good in that big nickel role basically for his career in Philadelphia. So that's the guy you see there as kind of that Tyrann Mathieu light situation. Kyle Duggar is a huge safety with athletic ability who showed really good chops rushing the passer and doing different things. So you have these guys that you all have to balance out. Not to mention you have Dante Hightower. Jawan Bentley's terrible in coverage, so third down situations, you're probably taking him out. You have Josh Uche, who's the backup outside linebacker who can fill in the middle in coverage situations. So there's a lot of different guys who I think are really talented. It's just how you fit it all together and how all these pieces fit. I'm not worried with Bill Belichick, but it is interesting because he has so many options to go with these guys.
Yeah, should be fun to see how that all plays out. Also going on to the front seven, you have, for the interior defensive linemen, you have Henry Anderson, Lawrence Guy, Byron Cowart, and then you have also they added Devon Godshaw, who I was a big fan of from Miami. They drafted Christian Barmore, who in the second round, who I was a big fan of, thought should have gone in the first round out of Alabama. And for the edge, you got guys like Matt Judon, Kyle Van Noy, Chase Winovich, who, if Winovich can just become a competent run defender, he could take the next step because he's so good at rushing the passer. This is tier 3 for me in both groups.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I actually like this run defense a little bit more with Godshaw, Bentley, and Hightower back. I think that's a really talented group. And then obviously the pass rushing is going to be the big thing. I think Van Noy being back is huge. I think Matthew Judon being on that group is huge. Uche, I think, can have a big year. Winovich, he's kind of in the hot seat now with all these guys. Belichick didn't play him a lot the second half of the season because he didn't improve a lot of this area. So he's kind of in the hot seat, and there's guys behind him waiting for that position and get those reps. The front three is going to be interesting because you have obviously Gottschalk coming in as the run-stuffing nose tackle. The big guy that I'm interested in watching is Christian Barmore because when I watched him in college, I kind of thought, hey, this guy, he's obviously a defensive tackle, but I also think he can operate as a 3-4 defensive end. And I could see that sort of situation. Patriots like bigger 3-4 defensive ends like Lawrence Guy. I think Barmore could be in that situation. And then on obvious pass situations, move on the inside while Gottschalk comes out. So they can do a lot of different things with this group too. And I think that's the one thing Belichick loves about this team and this defense this season is the versatility of this group and doing a lot of different things. They have so many guys and so much depth at every position that they can move guys around based on situational spots.
Right. Good stuff there by you. It's always nice to have, the Patriots expert here to go over this team. Because again, there's always a lot of research involved in the Patriots, given their, the way that they run their team. You don't just look at, okay, those are the 4 starters. They get a lot more creative than that. Kicker, Nick Folk, tier 3, whatever. Totally not salty about him being horrible in Tampa Bay and then being at least okay with New England. Overall, New England Patriots, 9.52 wins is where I have them at. They have the 5th best defense, 24th best offense. That puts them at 15th in the NFL, which is 7th in the AFC. I do have the Patriots as a playoff team as it stands right now.
Yeah. I mean, it feels possible. It feels like it should happen. The quarterback play is the biggest question. I mean, if this turns into like a tier 3 quarterback play, I feel like this team's easily in the playoffs. Now, the biggest question is, can you get even tier 3 quarterback play out of this group? It remains to be seen, but that's the biggest question for the Patriots overall. And I think that they can be pretty good next season. Also, along with Nick Folk, tier 1 punter, Jake Bailey, our best player last season.
Yes, Jake Bailey. Big fan of Jake Bailey. Again, punters, they barely matter. I'm just going to, that's, if we're being honest, a punter does not matter that much, but they do have great special teams, outside of just a kicker.
Yeah. I mean, so it's an interesting group. Like I said, I think there's versatility to this defense, which makes it interesting. And then the biggest question, like I said, is going to be quarterback and how all these pieces on defense fit. Because I think one of the things, like you said, it's like the Patriots aren't a conventional team. You got to look at different things when it comes to them. I think the biggest problem with last season is you saw guys like Jawan Bentley kind of stuck playing 3 downs. And Jawan Bentley, because of the lack of depth last season, he's an awful coverage linebacker. He can't get out on running backs. He can't cover slot guys. And honestly, he's not very good on tight ends either, despite his size. So he's a guy who really struggles in coverage. He was forced to play a lot of downs. This team, he's not going to be asked to be a lot in the coverage situations. So it changes a lot of this defense. And I think that the versatility makes it, I think it's going to end up as a top 10 defense next season, if not top 6 or 7.
Do you think Bill Belichick is going to be even more motivated now that Tampa Bay has won 3 championships in under 300 days? Do you think that now he's going to really want to win?
Yes. Bill
Because
Belichick didn't want to win before that.
right? Before people always said about Bill Belichick, he would be the guy that would go out and say like, just have fun, just everyone play safe, don't hurt anybody. If you have to take a playoff, take a playoff. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. He is, one of the most easygoing coaches in the league. So it makes
Yeah,
perfect
players
sense.
coach. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I love that. Please let the Patriots and Bucks play each other in the Super Bowl, not just for us, but just for the first take, undisputed, all that stuff will be electric if those two teams go to playoffs,
Well,
go to the Super Bowl.
I'm looking forward to the October 8th game. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that should be fun. All right, best team in the AFC East, according to both of us. Why don't you let us know why you had them at number one?
Well, I mean, obviously, one of the things we talked about during our quarterback rankings is I think you might have him just outside tier one. I have him tier one. Josh Allen played like a tier one quarterback last season. They have that. They have a star receiver. They have solid players just about everywhere. There's basically one major question with this group, which they addressed in the offseason. If they addressed it enough is the biggest question, but I just think top to bottom, this is the most impressive roster in the AFC East still, and still the team to beat.
Yeah, it's very good. We'll start off there. Sean McDermott, I had as my 7th best coach in the NFL. He's just, he's climbed up the coaching ladder every year. If I did, top 32 coaches every year, he would have gotten higher every year he's been in the league. And so, all the way up to 7 right now. And you also have, Josh Allen, like you said, I had him at number 6, which is just one spot out of tier 1. Really what it comes down to is, do you think Josh Allen is better than Lamar Jackson or Brady? If you do, you probably have Josh Allen at a tier 1. If you don't, then you give me tier 2. But I guess, this is where the Bills could, be a bit boom or bust right here. I could see Allen being a tier 1 quarterback. Would it be the craziest thing in the world for him to fall back and be a tier 3 quarterback? We've seen that happen before where a quarterback has one great season and regresses a little bit.
Carson Wentz. I guess it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world. I'd be a little surprised just because, I'd be a little surprised. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I mean, obviously we've seen it before, but I'm not expecting it to happen. I just think that, I think that he looked really special last season. I think he's a huge part of it. I think I had him at number 4 when we did our quarterback rankings. I had him ahead of Jackson and Russell Wilson. You had him, I think, below those guys, so that changed our 2 rankings. But I think he's a special talent, and the arm accuracy thing, we've talked about it to death. Adding that to his physical tools obviously made a huge difference, and he looked like the elite guy to me. So I think it's a special spot, and I'd really like to see the growth of McDermott. Obviously, he's a very good coach. He's proven that he's a very good coach, and in the age of, hey, we need to get the best offensive coordinator on the market as our next head coach, the Bills kind of zagged with getting McDermott, and it's worked out because he's been fantastic for this team.
Yeah, and they were able to keep Brian Daboll, who a lot of people thought might be gone. So a lot of good stuff there. I agree. I'm not saying that I think he's going to, be a horrible quarterback next year. I'm just saying there is that little, thing in the back of my head of, look at Lamar Jackson last year. He was literally the best player in football. And then, he's still really good. I still think he's a tier 1 quarterback, but he didn't have as good of a year. So I'm just saying, it's possible, something to maybe potentially be on the lookout for.
Yeah. No, I think it's sure. I think it's possible, but it's definitely not something I'm betting on. I'm expecting this to be the norm for him, and I expect him to be in the MVP conversation again.
Okay, well, fair enough. I have him just a little bit below that, I think, but we'll move on to halfback room. Not a great halfback room. They did add Matt Breida, who one of the weird he has a career 4.9 yards per carry, which I don't think matches the talent, but that's kind of fun. Devin Singletary and Zach Moss have both been effective. I have this as a tier 4 running back room just because I feel like one of these guys will probably do something well, but it's still not a super great situation. And again, as I've said, if you're not going to have a great running back room, you can settle for not a good running back room. You can, make it work other ways. Yeah,
I kind of hope that they just let Zach Moss take over the number 1 spot. Devin Singletary seems like an all right dude, but I can't see a situation where you're a high-level running back being that slow. and he looks slow on the field. And, he could be good in certain situations, catch teams off guard, but Moss just seems to have the higher ceiling for me. And I think he should be the number one running back next season for this group, because I think that, I just think he's the better running back. It's simple as that.
But if he's too slow, then does that mean that I'm too slow for a running back? Are you saying that I'm not going to make it in the NFL, Kyle?
Yeah, you've probably passed your prime, so it's probably too late for you.
Wow. Devastating news. Going on to the wide receiver room. You have Stephon Diggs, who that trade, one of those trades seemed to work out for both sides, which doesn't happen too often when both teams use it to get the same position, with Jefferson and Diggs both looking really good fits in those two respective teams. They added Emmanuel Sanders. They have Gabriel Davis. They obviously have Cole Beasley, who might not have the best takes on Twitter, but is a very good wide receiver. You also have Isaiah McKenzie as another depth guy. And then for tight ends, Dawson Knox, who's, kind of more of a blocker, and Jacob Hollister, who's, he's fine. He can kind of do both, but he's not great at either. It's a tier 2 receiving room for me. And a large part of that is just the Diggs and Beasley combo.
Yeah, I mean, Emmanuel Sanders has basically just become this gun for hire as a number 2 receiver. It's been kind of funny to watch him just get passed around. This is another team for him. I expect him to put up his usual, workman-like numbers. Beasley obviously has been everyone's favorite guy this offseason. Nearly 1,000 yards receiving last season. I expect him to have, another good season until he starts to show that he's slowed down. And, I think this group's actually 4D, because I think Gabriel Davis showed flashes last season as a rookie, 600 yards, 7 touchdowns last year, 17 yards per catch. And I think he's another guy who can get even better this next season and add more to this group. So 4 deep at receiver, obviously with, a great quarterback thrown to them. Yeah.
And you could argue that it's, should be a tier 1. I mean, it's currently below, I had it at 7, so it only had to jump 2 spots. But I have like the Titans and the Browns ahead of them. So if you feel that's differently, then add an extra 1 to the win total at the end. But that's where I have them. And to finish off the offense, the offensive line is another one that the Bills, they're just missing on all of these like tier 1 or tier 2s. I have them as tier 3, but they're 1 spot away. They're 12. Top 11 make tier 2. So, the tackles are great with Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams. The interior is where it takes maybe a step back. It's not horrible, but it is a step back with John Feliciano. You also have Cody Ford, who looks like that might not even be the case. They could put in some competition for that spot. You then have Mitch Morse as the center. So it's a good offensive line. It's definitely better at pass blocking, but for a team that passes a lot, that's kind of an okay situation. So I have it as tier 3, but again, it's very close to tier 2.
Yeah, it's a really it's a good enough group, and that's kind of what you asked for. It's not hurting the team like the Dolphins situation that we talked about, but it's also, it's not a group like you said that's gonna, boost this team any further, but they do enough to, get some blocking in there for Allen so he can make the throws and be comfortable.
Yeah, so offense 10th best in the NFL. Going over to defense now, coverage is probably the best part of this defense. You have Tre'Davious White, who did take a step back last year. He wasn't as good last year as we've seen in the past, but we have seen him be elite in the past. You also have Levi Wallace and Taron Johnson in the cornerback room. Their safeties are very good. You have 2, probably top 20 safeties at least, maybe top 15, I don't know, with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. And then for the linebackers, you have Tremaine Edmonds, who I feel like is really good, but he did struggle a bit when Milano was not playing. Milano really good in coverage. So I had this as a tier 2 coverage unit. And I think that part of this is I'm banking on Trey White to bounce back. So I have it as tier 2.
Yeah, they kind of struggled at points last season. And a lot of it, like you said, had to do with White kind of taking a slight dip in form last season. And I think that second cornerback spot's going to be the biggest question. Josh Norman's not there, but I thought was solid as that number 2 guy. And Levi Wallace steps in. So that's going to be the biggest question to me is how does that number 2 spot work out? And can he hold up?
Yeah, exactly. And then to finish off the defense, we'll talk about the front 7 with, I've already mentioned the linebackers. So then you have for the interior defensive lineman, Ed Oliver, who, there was a time when I wanted the Buccaneers to draft Ed Oliver over Devin White. That's why I'm not a GM. Good stuff by them, bad stuff by me. Because I mean, Oliver just hasn't been spectacular, and maybe he'll have another step forward. He's not a horrible player, but probably not someone you want as a starter, at least where he's been at. You also have Vernon Butler, and then for the edge, you have Mario Addison, Jerry Hughes, who's good, AJ Espinoza, and then they drafted Gregory Rousseau and Carlos Basham in the first and second round, respectively. I do have this as a tier 3 run defense. A lot of it is with the linebackers, and a tier 4 pass rush, which brings their total defense to tied for 12th in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of is how we felt about this team, right? The pass rush is the biggest question. The Chiefs battled with injuries on the offensive line in the playoffs. They still couldn't really do a whole lot against Patrick Mahomes. And we saw how that kind of changed in the Super Bowl. I mean, they've had Jerry Hughes there, and I think he's fine, but he's nothing spectacular, especially he's kind of the number one guy for that pass rushing group.
Right.
And they just need one of these guys to work out. They drafted AJ Epineza 2 years ago at this point now, and I think, or last year, and then Gregory Rousseau this year. They need one of those guys to work out, right? That's the biggest thing. If one of those guys pans out, then obviously this can be a pretty good front seven, but that's the biggest question with this group.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you look at the draft capital they put into this defensive line with Ed Oliver, that was 2 years ago, AJ Espinoza last year, and now they've got Gregory Rousseau and Carlos Basham Jr. So they've put a lot of, first and second round draft capital into this pass rush group, and at a certain point it has to start being a good pass rush, and at this point it hasn't. And like I said, I'm not a huge fan of going all out to build a pass rush anyways. I think it's okay to not have the most talent there. You can find other ways to win, but if it works out, that can get you some extra points there. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing would have been like if they had taken I'm trying to think of who was available at the time. Hypothetically, would you feel better at about this team if they took, I think he went right before, but if they got an Eric Stokes before Gregory Rousseau and just said, okay, we're just going to plug in second quarterback and figure it out from there. Would you feel better about this team?
I would, yeah. I mean, again, I'm a big fan of Eric Stokes, so maybe that factors into my opinion a little bit. The guys, but even the couple guys after, you have Odafe Owe and Joe Tyron were the next two picks. I think I like both of those guys more than I liked Rousseau in the same position. And there's also Tyson Campbell, who I'm a big fan of, who went one spot later, who I think they probably could have done. That's what I would have done. And again, as I said, I'm not by no means the best at this, although I have put a lot more emphasis into it this year than I have in previous years. But yeah, I think that it's in terms of team building, it might not be the best. Although the flip side is, I will say this, someone like a corner, they probably wouldn't be great this year. Corners take longer to develop. A lot of edge rushers, they can come in and be good right away. So maybe you do feel like Rousseau is someone who can be good right away. He did rack up a lot of sacks. Again, if you watch the tape, they're very weird. They're college sacks. They're not NFL sacks. But we'll see. Yeah,
I mean, I think the one argument when we talked about this during the offseason is the one argument for Rousseau is, you just don't see guys with that physical tools that he has. Physically, he can be dominant. Now, we need to see it consistently on the football field is the question. So we'll see what happens overall. But, I mean, I was a little lower on him, too, just because of the whole package wasn't there for me. But physically, he can be a really good player, and it's kind of a boomer bust pick, which I'm okay with because they have good players everywhere else. I just wish that they had found some way to address this pass rush just outside of just getting Rousseau.
Yeah, but it's also tough. I mean, you look at the prices that Bud Dupree gets. I don't hate them not signing a pass rusher. I'm not going to kill him for it. Again, it is a lot of draft capital into one position, but I'm not going to kill him over it. Tyler Bass, tier 3 kicker, puts this team as a whole with 10.64 wins, which is 10th in the league, 4th in the AFC. So they look like they're going to get that 4 seed. And keep in mind, I would actually probably say it's a little bit higher just because of how many, on the offense, how many, they had a 7 in coverage, a 7 in the wide receiving room, a 6 in quarterback, and the top 5 gets you to tier 1. So one of those would probably end up being, it's not like the 5th best quarterback and the 6th best quarterback all of a sudden have this big drop off. That's just kind of a way you have to organize it. So I would say probably a little bit higher, maybe 11 to 12 wins for Buffalo. But right now, 10.64 feels right. This feels like the team to beat in the AFC East.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely the team to beat in the AFC East, and they're probably going to end up a little higher than that ranking for the reasons you said, and also, getting to play the Jets twice, all that kind of stuff, it all kind of helps. So I think that they're going to be a good team. And the question is, did they do enough to make this team a Super Bowl contender? We'll see. I don't know. It kind of feels like that this could be a sneaky trade deadline team if they want to add someone, but, the NFL's historically quiet on the trade deadline, so we'll see what happens with this team. I think that they are a Super Bowl contender, but I have them just outside of the teams like Kansas City, Tennessee, and Cleveland still.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those three teams you listed, I had in my top 5. Like, I think they could challenge for Tennessee. I think they could do that a little bit easier than they could for Kansas City and Cleveland. And I think the hope is, if I'm a Bills fan, the way I see them making the playoffs, winning the Super Bowl, kind of the pathway I have is if maybe like one of the Browns or Chiefs regresses, they can get into like the AFC Championship again. And if you do that, anything can happen. So I do feel like, to me, they're a clear 4th best team. You could argue they're the 3rd. I think it's hard to argue they're a better roster than Cleveland and Kansas City.
Yeah. And don't forget Baltimore's there too. So that's another team in the conversation. This is something I've talked about. Look, the AFC is really good this year. I think that there's a lot of teams that are, I think there's a lot of mid-tier teams, but I still think there's a lot of really good teams in this conference too. It's going to be tough sledding for a lot of these teams. And, when you get towards the top, it's kind of splitting hairs, and, they just seem a little bit behind in some of the other teams in certain spots.
Yeah. And I guess like is the best case scenario for them, like just like Gregory Rousseau turns in, is able to be like a 10-sack guy. And I think that's probably the way that this team can get over the hump, is if they just like completely nail that pick.
It's either that or like him and Epineza combined for like 12 sacks, right? That they're both at least like solid. They don't need to be awesome guys, but if they at least combine to make it a competent group, then obviously that changes things. But I also, I don't think it's a guaranteed thing that either of those guys are good too. So I think it's a tough situation. And that's why I think they could add somebody. But like you said, pass rush is still kind of expensive in the NFL. So it's not easy to necessarily just find guys in that group.
Yeah. So with me having them as number 4, that kind of puts them in like I feel like they are a divisional round, win a playoff game, but then lose in round 2 value of team. Where do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that? Where do you see them going this year?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, you think about it, and then you're like, okay, this team could make the AFC Championship. But at the same time, it all kind of depends on the matchup. If they're playing Kansas City in round 2, I'm taking Kansas City right now, just looking at rosters. I would take Kansas City in a round 2 playoff matchup. I would take Cleveland in a round 2 playoff matchup right now. I mean, the one advantage Buffalo has is cornerback in that matchup, but is it enough in an advantage? I'm taking Baltimore still right now in a round 2 matchup, I think. And I'm still probably taking Tennessee in a round 2 matchup. So that's 4 teams right there that I think I would take over Buffalo. Now, I still think that they can beat all of those teams, but I think right now you see them below it. So I think they can make the AFC title, but yeah, I mean, round 2 feels fair right now.
Yeah, and we'll see. Again, all we can do is talk about what these teams are on paper. That doesn't always work out the way, but yeah, that's where we have them. All right, so that's the show. We talked about a lot. We got through the everything here. Fun show. Kyle, why don't you let us know? Why don't you let them know where they can find us before we head out?
Yeah, once again, follow him at Jackson Kruger on Twitter. That's at Jackson Kruger. Also, like this video and subscribe to the channel below. It's a great channel. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Gronin on Twitter. That's BYKYLEGRONDIN on Twitter, by Kyle Gronin. And then follow the account page at On the Sideline JK on Twitter. That's at On the Sideline JK for any show updates.
Yes. All right. And good stuff, Kyle. Any final thoughts before we head out?
I think we just about covered it. AFC East is going to be exciting. I'm excited to watch the Patriots, honestly. Just being a bit of a homer, I'm excited to watch this team, and I think it's going to be much better.
Yes. So next week, I believe the way we want to do this is we always want to end with doing our teams. So the last one, we'll end the show with the NFC South and talking about, Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Saints and all that. So I guess we could do counterclockwise again. which means should we start with everyone's favorite division, the NFC East?
Yes. Yeah, that sounds good. We can go with the NFC East. The most competitive division in football, for better or worse. It's going to be
That's
really
right.
fun to talk about. So we'll do that next Sunday right here at 5:00.
Yes. All right. So everyone, thanks for watching. If you're whether it's live or after the fact, if you want to listen to the audio only, anywhere you get your podcast, that is available. So definitely feel free to check that out. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.
Peace.